welcome back to the Director's Garage. How'd you like that episode 50? Was that insane? I mean, you guys watched it in droves, which tells me you really like the more expensive stuff. Who doesn't, right? Well, anyway, I'm your host and resident idiot, Michael, and today we're going to be doing a deep dive on Thieaudio's Legacy 4 IEM. It's a headphone sent to us by our friends at Linsoul. But also, check this out. At the same time, we're going to be doing a Shootout. It's a Shootout sound check combo episode. And if the Legacy 4 wins, I have to buy it, and that's the way it works around here. But first, I do have one headline for today. Drama in the music world. I'm talking about Taylor Swift, who just re-released her album Fearless. Technically, it's called Fearless Taylor's version. I'm a fan of her music, not her biggest fan, but, you know, I've never been to her concert or anything, and I doubt I'd ever go, but, yeah, I've watched the Disney things. I thought they were cool, but I respect what she's accomplished as a songwriter. I respect her as a musician, too. But there's something else going on under the surface here, and, you know, at the Director's Garage, I like to kind of dig a little bit and explain things. You see, in November, Scooter Braun, who owns Big Machine, which is Taylor's old label, well, he sold Taylor's masters to an investment group. Taylor had offered to buy her old catalog if Big Machine ever went to sell it, but she claims that Braun sold her catalog out from under her. And there are more than a few of her recent songs, if you listen to her records, that are dedicated to this entire drama. So now those old records belong to someone else, at least the recordings. But Taylor still owns the copyright. Follow me here. The masters, or the music as recorded, in the old days we would say the physical tapes, they're separate from the music or the copyright, or the written songs themselves. Those are called sync rights. Think of it as sort of the CD or digital recording versus the sheet music of those songs. They are very different things, and there's different licenses that apply. So say I want a Taylor Swift song for the theme of the Director's Garage. Okay, that would be tragic because it would look like the old man trying to look cool or an old douchebag looking extraordinarily creepy. But to get her original recording, for the sake of argument, of course, say I want to get You Belong With Me for my theme. Well, I have to make two payments. First, I have to license the rights to the master, which is the actual recording. And now that belongs to the investment group, so I have to pay them. Plus, I have to pay sync rights on the copyright to the music itself. And that has to go to Taylor. That's a payment that I would make to Taylor. Now, if I wanted just the song, but I was going to sing it myself or re-record it with my own voice, which, again, would be insanely tragic, I just have to pay the sync rights, and those rights are owned by Taylor only. So in losing her masters, Taylor has decided to re-record note for note each of her albums that got sold. And she's then going to tell her fans to only buy or stream this new Taylor version. And what it does is it cuts off the money flow to the investment group that purchased those old masters. To help seal the deal, she's sweetening the pot by adding 6 new tracks that were written during that time period but didn't make the final cut of the original Fearless album. Now, these are bonus tracks that can't ever appear on the original release because they weren't included as a part of this, wait for it, $300 million deal. And you thought my stacks were expensive. So there's an incentive for fans to buy this new version. And what this does is it puts the investment group in an uncomfortable situation. They paid an insane amount of money for these masters. And if Taylor can pull this off, those old masters are going to be worthless. More so because, say the investment group wants to sell a Taylor song to use in like an Acne commercial on TV. Well, they can't license it because the Acne company also has to obtain those sync rights to the recording, which are owned by, follow me, Taylor, right? Do you think that Taylor is going to green light that sale? No way. She's going to tell the Acme company they can license her new version of the recording and probably even give them a competing bid or a discount. Now, she's got 6 albums to re-record, and Fearless Taylor's version is just the first of what's to come. But I find this behind-the-scenes stuff just fascinating, and that's your headline for today. So turning now to the subject of today's episode, that's these guys. Well, most interesting, this one right here, the Thieaudio Legacy 4. Now, folks, the most interesting leaps forward in sound quality, I've been saying this for a long time now, are happening right now in the IEM space. And there's no company more on the forefront of in-ear tech than Linsoul. The best part is the latest and greatest IEMs from brands like Thieaudio and their Clairvoyance and Monarch IEMs, the new Dunu EST112 that is getting so much attention these days, or the stunning C-Audio Kaguya. Linsoul has got your hookup into the Asian markets. Linsoul and Lillian Dang have been a supporter of this show. In fact, they were the first manufacturer to step up and agree to send their products here because they believed in what we're doing. Now, check them out. You just can't beat their price for performance, because the best part is these days, for just a few $100s, okay, you can get to 1,000 in a hurry. Let's dig deeper. But you can buy into an audiophile experience that few headphones can touch, and that's at any price point. And today we have just that. The Thieaudio Legacy 4 is a 4-driver arrangement. Get it? 4, Legacy, 4. Come on, you knew that. I know you knew that. Anyway, 3 of the drivers are Knowles balanced armatures. Good quality balanced armature. And the 4th is an 8mm dynamic driver. And today we're not only going to break down the sound of that Legacy 4, but we're going to put them up in a shootout. Blow those up this time. Yes, the Legacy 4 will take on the Moondrop Starfield, our current budget champ, and the Meze Rai Solo. All 3 of these headphones can be had for less than $200. And the Starfield comes in at a featherweight price of just $108. Now, the Starfield is a single dynamic driver, but it's 10 millimeters in size. It's 2 millimeters larger than that Legacy. And the Meze features a dynamic driver also, but there's no coil moving a magnet behind the membrane, the driver. Instead, the membrane itself is charged. It's very interesting technology. Now, it's impressive to me that $200 will even get you a 4-driver IEM. I can't think of another IEM at that price point that will bring you a driver count that high. If you know of another, comment below. I'd love to know about them. And we're going to start today with ergonomics. And the Legacy 4 comes with an impressive cable. Check this out. It's a 4 down into a 2 weave, but it's a beautiful weave, and it's this silver cable like this, and the wires themselves are thickish. I mean, this really feels sturdy, like it's going to take some wear, and IEMs, you throw them in a bag, they're going to take some abuse. So Thieaudio really killed it on the cable. Now, the Meze is the weakest of the 3 cables. I mean, this is like microscopic. It's 4 into 2 also. It's a very different kind of weave. It's a much tighter weave, but look at how tiny these cables are. They're just little BBs in there. I'm always afraid I'm going to cut it or pull it out. But the other thing is that this is the only one to feature MMCX connectors. See these guys right here? The problem is that this gets messy with this IEM because these headphones, these IEMs, the Mezes, they spin on this axis really easily. They're very loose. And anytime you move the headphone, they get misaligned and you're trying to figure out, wait, does this go in the right? And do I have it oriented correctly? It's a big mess. Now, the Moondrop's cable is color-coded. It's kind of in the middle of the other 2. This isn't quite as thin as the Meze, but it's nowhere near as thick as the Thieaudios. Now, other ergonomics, you have the cases, which you can see right here. the Meze has, to me, the coolest case. It's this beautiful kind of cool design. This is leather, and it's got this metal faceplate on it. The Thieaudio has a really nice logo. It's kind of a coffin case here, and it's padded. I'm going to show this to you I'm going to mess up my thing. I'm going to show this to you. Look how padded this is. It's really like spongy soft. It probably protects the IEMs quite well. And I really do like the classy Thieaudio logo up here printed. It's almost as nice as the Meze. And then the Starfield Fumble. And the Starfield down here has the kind of like most bargain basement case of the three. Now, fit-wise, the Meze is the most comfortable for me. They seem to fit the best. It's a nice small metal, and the metal feels really good against your ears. It's very nice. The Moondrop comes in second place for me. They're a little on the large side, but they fit really well. And the weakest of the three, unfortunately, is the Legacy 4. These bores on the end are particularly large in diameter, and they tend to like bother my ears under longer sessions. Now, I do like the styling of the Legacy 4. I think that this blue and orange paint swirl, and it's kind of got a little metallic going on too. This is a technique that you see in much more expensive IEMs. I do really like the design of the Meze. I think this is a classic, very understated, very sophisticated sort of look. And the Moondrop has this plum crazy design. I do like the graphics on it. I think the plum crazy thing, it kind of has worn on me as I've had these for months and months now. Now let's talk general sound signature, and for me the Legacy is the brightest of these three. The Moondrop has kind of a deep V shape, and then the Rai Solo, it kind of comes out the most balanced to my ears. Now the Moondrop takes a lot more power to drive than these other two headphones. I'm up about a quarter turn on the volume knob to get the Moondrop to the same volume level. The Legacy 4 has a really winning tuning, and they left their mark on me right out of the box. I mean, you saw that first impression segment, and really all three of these are tuned quite well. I can't really knock them for their general tuning. The Legacy 4 sounded the fastest to me, and if you like clarity and detail, the Legacy takes it. Don't look any further. The Meze doesn't have the bass punch of the Starfield or the Legacy 4. The Meze kind of comes across as the flattest response of the three. So let's talk about soundstage and imaging for a second. The Thieaudio Legacy 4 is one of those headphones that sort of favors one over the other. And in this case, it's got a better soundstage than it does imaging. The soundstage feels reasonably wide for an IEM, particularly at this price. I mean, $200. And it seems to sacrifice maybe just a little bit of that imaging. Things just go a tad bit vague as far as where they're coming from, but then you get this nice soundstage that kind of makes up for it. Now, by comparison, the Meze is even a little bit wider to my ears than the Legacy 4, and the Moondrop comes in a little bit narrower. They're all a little bit on the vague side. They don't image the best. I would say that the Meze maybe edges out the Legacy 4 by a hair when it comes to imaging. I really am splitting hairs here, and the Moondrop sort of trails both. Let's talk DIPSWITCH. I can't say this with a straight face. The Legacy 4 has these two tuning dip switches on each bud. So I kind of messed around with them. I flipped and I listened, and I flipped it the other way, and then I flipped it a third way, and I listened, I lathered, I rinsed, I repeated.
Wow, that was freaky.
It's an analogy. DIPSWITCH 1, though, seems to give a mild, and I mean mild, bass boost. The second switch seems to give a little bit of a mid-range boost. Now, to my ears, that mid-range boost on the second DIPSWITCH didn't improve things much. So I wound up, for the purposes of this review, going with the bass response up because I wanted these to be a little bit deeper, and then DIPSWITCH 2 I left off. Plus, I just kind of like saying the name DIPSWITCH. And with the bass and treble now adjusted with our dip switches, you know I'm going to say this all the time now, we're going to get to sound structure. And when we talk about sound structure, we're talking about bass, we're talking about mids, and we're talking about treble. in that order today, I swear. So I'm going to start with the bass, and I think the bass on the Legacy 4 is very good. It's not crazy bass, it's not bass head territory, but for its price point, it's very good and it's reasonably detailed. It's got decent slam that does punch below the belt when it needs to, if you know what I mean. The bass on the Legacy 4 compares better to the Starfield than it does the Rai, and that's a good thing because the Starfield has the best bass of these three IEMs. So you want to be a close second to the Starfield than sort of getting compared with the weenie bassness of the Meze. Now, when we move on to mids, I gotta say, I don't have a problem at all with the mids on the Legacy 4. I can't find much flaw with them. They're the least prone to congestion because they have balanced armatures, and generally speaking, the balanced armatures are going to be faster than a dynamic driver most of the time. And the Meze's mids are kind of the most forward, which is something that I don't really care for. And they're tuned in a way to sort of give you this perception, this wider perception of space, but it kind of creates this muted sound effect around 4 to 6K. Not good. The Moondrop's mids are the most recessed, which I appreciate, but the Moondrop is the slowest of these headphones, and they are prone to congestion when things get really complex. So I'm going to have to give a win here to the Legacy 4 on the mids. The Rai's mids are just too far forward, and the Starfields are just too prone to congestion. Now, when we get to treble, the Legacy 4 is the brightest of these three headphones, and they can go a bit shouty in the wrong situation, which is why I kind of preferred the Legacy 4 with darker music. Pairing these with David Bowie or a Dan Fogelberg or Hall & Oates or any of those FM staples, they work really well with, and I enjoyed them. The Meze has the nicest sparkle over the top layer, and I think I preferred the Meze with the wider variety of tracks. And the Starfield also has a remarkable treble, but it's not the last name in like treble extension. Now, you know I love to talk music, and I'm going to do a little bit of a shorter, truncated version of that today because we're running a little bit on the long side with the Shootout combined with the sound check. I'd call your attention to David Bowie's Hunky Dory. Changes was the big hit off this record. It's such a rich and textured album from 1971. Melodically, it's super clever. Bowie did so many great albums back in this era. Ziggy Stardust, Space Oddity, The Man Who Sold the World. It was such a creative time, and David seemed to be topping himself constantly. I appreciate that this album is a little less theatrical and has a more matured approach. The songs have more heart and more nostalgia than his other records. This album really came alive on the Legacy 4. I thoroughly enjoyed this record on them. Now, next I'm going to talk about some blues. I don't talk about blues enough on this show, and today we're doing it. I want to talk about Muddy Waters, and I'm going to call your attention to the revival albums of his. Now, I'll cover Muddy's career in greater detail in another episode, but the chess bluesman was sort of muddling through the 1970s. He was trying to find an audience. He had dabbled in the late 60s in the psychedelic sound, sort of the blues equivalent of what Miles did with Bitches Brew, but to a much lesser effect. Frankly, it was just a bad experiment. He called it Electric Mud. Anyway, Muddy was continuing to make records, but they weren't selling. And then in 1975, he did something unusual. He fused that Chicago classic blues sound with the Louisiana vibe. And I'd encourage you to check out the Muddy Waters Woodstock album sometime. It's this interesting mix of Zydeco inside of a blues structure. It was a Grammy-winning album, and it was recorded at Levon Helm's place in Woodstock, New York. I think that was Big Pink. But today I'm calling your attention to Muddy's next LP. It's called Hard Again, and fresh off that Grammy win, Muddy revamped his entire band. He kept only Pinetop Perkins on piano. James Cotton came in to play harmonica, but the big change to this lineup was bringing in the great Johnny Winter on guitar. And Johnny also produced this album. It launched 3 straight records of hard, aggressive South Side blues, and it was recorded at the iconic Chess Studios. Hard Again features Muddy's best recording of Mannish Boy, in my opinion anyway. Winters is screaming out cat calls to Muddy's verse. It's driving, it's gritty, and it's even a little bit on the dangerous side in sound. Pulling no punches, Muddy wails through driving arrangement after driving arrangement. Hard Again is Muddy's best and purest revival in the years before he died. Side note, I had the honor of seeing Muddy play live several times before he died. I was still in those formative years musically, and his sound was not lost on me. He lived less than a mile from where I grew up. It was just off the railroad tracks in Westmont, Illinois. Anyway, the Legacy 4 was a terrific match for this record. The bass punches through, the drums, played by Willie Smith, are a driving sensation. This is one of my favorite listens on the Legacy. The tonality of the guitars and the harmonica never turned shouty. The whole thing is a rousing experience on the Legacy 4. So folks, we're getting down to it, and the reality is I'm fine with carrying any of these IEMs with me. They're all spectacular, budget-minded purchases. Not one of them is going to disappoint you. But here at the Director's Garage, we're all about picking winners. Stop it. Stop it. And in this case, I'm going with the Moondrop Starfield. At $108, you're just not going to go wrong with this thing. The clarity and the added dimension of the Legacy 4 just couldn't, for me, overtake the visceral bass punch this gives you and the deep V tuning. I prefer kind of a darker, more laid-back Starfield tuning to the Legacy 4, which is just a little bit on the bright side. The Meze kind of comes in last for me in this shootout, mostly because of the mids. The mid presence is just something that I generally try to avoid. And overall, I just appreciate the Starfield because it's so laid back and it carefully carves out any annoying frequency response. That said, if you want a bit more speed and detail, the Legacy 4 is going to do that, and it's going to avoid the congestion that I can get on the Starfield at sometimes because it's a faster IEM. So there is a case for the Legacy 4 over the Starfield should you prize detail and soundstage above all else. In that case, I would say yes, the Legacy 4 is worth the extra $90. Now I gotta thank Linsoul for sending the Thieaudio Legacy 4 for us to review. And I got to thank you for stopping by today. And if you haven't yet, think about subscribing to this channel. It helps us out in growing this thing into bigger and bigger, better things. Or not, it's your choice. Now, next up, we're going back to the campfire. We're going to do another sound check and shootout combo episode. Folks, we're going to put the Andromeda up against the unique Melody Mest, the Mighty Mest. You don't want to miss that one. I sure don't. And then I've got a quick hit of another budget IEM, brand new, just came out. And after that, I've got a huge reveal. I'm going to let you guys know what I've been jamming to, and no, it's not the Stax. Imagine that. It's not the Stax. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode, do the thumbs up thing, or if it was just too much sound and music for you, go ahead and do the other thing, and I will see you before you know it.